This is an op-ed from the New York Times titled, "Maybe They're Just Bad People. Not All Trump Support is Ideological." I want to point out that just because someone writes an op-ed for the New York Times doesn't mean the New York Times agrees with it. They're just trying to give you a diverse set of opinions. So this is from Michelle Goldberg. You can relate this opinion to her, although I will say I am not a huge fan of the New York Times simply because they hired Sarah Jeong, who is an overt racist. I don't like racism, and I don't like the New York Times for economically supporting her in that effort. There are some people who I think are worthy of a second chance, but the New York Times, while I'm kind of torn on the issue, like sure, give Sarah Jeong a second chance and all that, the way they lied and downplayed it, and instead of apologizing for her racism, they said, oh, it was just a joke. It was just a joke. But let's talk about the New York Times calling Trump supporters, maybe they're just bad people. I want to start by saying, well, for one, I feel like this story is kind of circuitous, but I feel like somebody without a political faction. Because my politics land me squarely center-left. I have taken all of the tests in the book. My politics are social liberal, plain and simple, and I am proud of that. I am proud that I believe in these issues. The problem is the tribal left in this country is identitarian and authoritarian, and they're typically just not good people. You certainly have bad people on the right. I can get along with moderate Trump supporters. I can get along with moderate Democrats too. But there's a graph image that I show time and time again showing how the left has been extremely spread out while conservatives are more or less coalescing around common ideas. That means most conservatives I meet are moderate and reasonable, though there are fringe weirdos on the left, on the far right. But it's few and far between. But the mainstream Democrats are spread out in a ridiculous way, and I constantly meet people who have ridiculous ideas, are overtly racist, are overtly authoritarian, support violence. It's rather terrifying. But let's read this op-ed from the New York Times, where they talk bad about Trump supporters. And you know what? I'll say this, hey, maybe the opinion is apt. We'll see what Michelle has to say. 7 years ago, a former aide to Ralph Reed, who also worked briefly for Paul Manafort, published a tawdry, shallow memoir that is also one of the more revealing political books I've ever read. Lisa Barron was a pro-choice, pro-gay rights, hard-partying Jew who nonetheless made a career advancing the fortunes of the Christian right. She opened her book with an anecdote about performing oral activities on a future member of the George W. Bush administration during the 2000 primary, which she wrote perfectly summed up my groupie-like relationship to politics at the time. I wanted it, I worshipped it, and I went for it. It's not exactly a secret that politics is full of amoral careerists, lusting literally and figuratively for access to power. Still, if you're interested in politics because of values and ideas, it can be easier to understand people who have foul ideologies better than those who don't have ideologies at all. Steve Bannon, a quasi-fascist, I'm gonna dispute that, with delusions of grandeur, that's just unnecessary insulting. Look, you want to make a point, I get it. Like there's criticism of Bannon by all means. I'm not a fan of the guy, but I really hate how they throw this around. Fascist. Makes more sense to me than Anthony Scaramucci, a political cipher who likes to be on TV. I don't think I'm alone. Consider all the energy spent trying to figure out Ivanka Trump's true beliefs when she's shown that what she believes most is that she's entitled to power and prestige. Citation, please. Citation. Everybody assumes everyone else is evil. Basically, her argument right now is Steve Bannon is a fascist, Anthony Scaramucci wants to be on TV, and Ivanka Trump, she just wants power and privilege. Okay, well, can you show me proof of that? I understand it's an opinion. By all means, you're entitled to your opinion. I think your opinion is dumb. Barron's book, Life of the Party, A Political Press Tart Bears All, is useful because it's a self-portrait of a cynical, fame-hungry narcissist, a common type, but one underrepresented in the stories we tell about partisan combat, a person of limited self-awareness. She seemed to think readers would find her right-wing exploits plucky and cute. Barron became Reed's communication director because she saw it as a stepping stone to her dream job, White House press secretary, a position she envisioned in mostly sartorial terms. Outfits would be planned around the news on the day, she wrote. I'd like to point out, this person was apparently a liberal, a pro-choice, pro-gay rights, hard-partying Jew. I don't know why her being Jewish has anything to do with it, but we can see that she's pretty much a liberal who didn't care and then just shilled for the right because she wanted a job. This is not a criticism of the conservative. This is a criticism of a liberal. If I don't know what the point, I think I understand the point she's making about Trump supporters. She's effectively arguing, I believe, that there are people working, pro-Trump people who aren't actually pro-Trump, don't care, and just want money and fame. And that's true, and that's fair. But I certainly wouldn't say it's everybody, and I certainly wouldn't point the finger at someone and accuse them of doing as such. Do they exist? You'd be insane not to think that they're certainly con artists who don't actually believe what they say. Of course, they exist on the left and the right. She opens with evidence of someone on the left who does such a thing. So I think it's unfair to frame this directly at Trump supporters. But let's continue. Reading Barron's story helped me realize emotionally something I knew intellectually. It's tempting for those of us who interpret politics for a living to overstate the importance of competing philosophies. We shouldn't forget the enduring role of sheer vanity. Completely agree. This brings us to Monday's New York Times article about Bill White and his husband, Brian Urey. Headlined, How a Liberal Couple Became Two of NY's Biggest Trump Supporters. The answer, ego. A former big-ticket Democratic fundraiser, White went straight from Hillary Clinton's election night party to Donald Trump's when he realized which way the wind was blowing. I didn't want to be part of that misery pie, he said, of the dreary vibe at the Clinton event. Oof. Yeah, it was dreary. People were crying. People were screaming. Man. Another turning point came earlier this year when he claims Chelsea Clinton snubbed him at Ralph Lauren's Polo Bar in Manhattan, leading him to call Donald Trump Jr., who offered to come to him right away. Yes, believe it or not, when people are mean to you, you then go and talk to other people who will be nice to you. Is that at all surprising? I wouldn't blame that on ego. I'd say people are attracted to feeling comfortable around other people. And if you want to be a snooty, mean person and snub somebody, yeah, they're going to turn around and go the other direction. This story, like Barron's book, is arresting in its picture of shameless, unvarnished thirst. White and Urey mouth some talking points about disliking identity politics and valuing authenticity. Like a lot of Trump apologists, White insists the president isn't racist because African-American employment figures have improved during his administration. But the lurid opportunism that's driving him and his husband to embrace Trump is obvious. Such opportunism is far from rare. It's just not often that we see it exhibited so starkly. And this is really interesting, right? The fact that two people who used to be liberals are now supporting Trump because they don't like identity politics and authoritarianism and things of that nature, and they like Trump for being authentic. Oh, but that's clearly because they're opportunists. That's what they say on the left, grifters. They call people grifters. They say they're not really left-wing. Maybe you should realize when liberals leave your ranks, it's not because they're evil, narcissistic opportunists. Sometimes maybe. But maybe it's because you are bad people, right? Plain and simple. She points out in the story that Chelsea Clinton snubbed this person, so he called Donald Trump Jr. Okay, and I'm sure Donald Trump Jr. was nice. I did a debate with a left-wing journalist and said, when I talk about stuff, the left attacks me like crazy. And then Trump supporters sitting there with beers going, hey, buddy, come over here and come talk to me. What ends up happening is you have people who used to be liberals being yelled at by the left, insulted, called all the worst names in the book. And the other thing too is the left shuts down debate. They ban people from social media for saying things. So they don't hear. They also refuse to do interviews for the most part. All of a sudden then these former liberals find themselves sitting among Trump supporters who say, oh, but here's an argument to that idea. Here's an argument to that idea. Eventually these liberal people only hear these ideas from Trump supporters and go, hey, that does make sense. Hey, then they decide to be conservative. Not realizing they're just not getting the debate because the left are bad people. Not all of them. Like I mentioned, most of my friends on the left, and they're fine. Most people don't fall into this nonsense, of extremism like we see in the media. The media is substantially more extreme than the average person because they're trying to attract readers and viewers. So they have to, push the envelope to be relevant. But the point is, I think it's fair to say, if you turn around and there's someone being kind to you and saying, let me talk to you, you're more likely to listen. Flies with honey, as it goes. Trump is hardly the first politician to attract self-serving followers. And you see, now that she's created this false narrative, the assumption that these people must just be false followers, she then carries on. It's like you start with a lie, a misrepresentation, an assumption, and then from there you build up this grand story about Trump's self-serving followers. White and Urey, after all, used to be Clintonites. The guest list at their lavish wedding, the Times once wrote, read like a telephone book if the white pages printed a version containing only the rich and influential. But Trump is unique as a magnet for grifters. Ah, there it is. Climbers and self-promoters. In part because decent people won't associate with him, with the exception of national security professionals sticking around to Trump from blowing up the world. There are two kinds of people in the president's orbit, the immoral and the amoral. Wonderful. You've created a false narrative, a straw man, you've made assumptions, and from those assumptions you are now creating the narrative. Absolutely beautiful. It's all, yeah. Trump has no genuine people. No one actually believes in what they're doing. Please. Everyone thinks they're the good guy. Everyone stands tall and says, God is on my side. That's what they truly believe. Meanwhile, they're holding a hammer to the nuclear warhead while they yell, God is on their side. In many ways, the insincere Trumpists are the most frustrating because they don't really believe in Trump's belligerent nationalism and racist conspiracy theories. We keep expecting them to feel shame or remorse, but they're not insincere because they believe in something better than Trumpism. Rather, they believe in very little. They are transactional in a way that makes no psychological sense to those of us who see politics as a moral drama. They might as well be wearing jackets saying, I really don't care, do you? But perhaps the real issue is, these people have been indoctrinated by media propaganda into thinking the world is ending, and Trump is a fascist, and it's the Fourth Reich, and it's all happening again. Oh! That's what they think. It's indoctrination and propaganda. She ends by saying, Barron's book helped me grasp what public life is about for such people. Yes, the people in your head, the others. I loved being in the middle of something big, and the biggest thing in my life was Ralph, she wrote in one of her more plaintive passages. Without him, I was nobody. Such a longing for validation is underrated as a political motivator. Senator Lindsey Graham, another insincere Trumpist, once justified his sycophantic relationship with the president by saying, if you knew anything about me, I want to be relevant. Some people would rather be on the wrong side than on the outside. And some people, like you, don't understand that we're all people, that we all think we're doing the right thing, and that people have different opinions. And from that, you have to understand that just because you've heard bad things in the media doesn't mean that Trump supporters are bad people. They really think they're good people doing the best they can to make the world a better place. So do people on the left. One of the biggest differences I find is that the tribal left has drifted into authoritarianism, where they feel they have a right to lie and misrepresent. But moderate, not necessarily moderate, but the default left can't empathize with other people. They can't think outside of their own perspective and realize that everyone is the hero of their own story. Please, I implore you, take a philosophy class. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you all tomorrow on the main channel at 4 p.m.